qualify for all of what we just talked about, but there is a first contact mission right now because we are approaching, through the rising consciousness raising that's been going on for the last few decades, and especially the last half decade, which has been accelerated. We now have a contact mission that is very close to coming, which will actually be the mission that helps us to finish off our movement toward becoming fully conscious and qualified on an entirely planet-wide basis for being a member of the Federation.
Okay. So fully conscious would be, well, from my understanding, having all of our abilities, right?
Right.
And what else? Sort of thing.
When you're fully conscious, that means you are connected completely between your spiritual and your physical and your mental and your emotional aspects. All these various parts of you combine together with in the spiritual, and then you become a being that exists not only in physicality, this world that we know, but also in the spiritual realms as well. And you become a master of both. And of course, what they like to have me talk about, what fully conscious beings are in this reality of physicality, they're what they like to call physical angels.
Physical angels. Oh, okay. So, because I do believe we are multidimensional now, so fully consciousness would be integrating.
Right.
That,
we integrate it all together. Our light body and our physical body and all the other aspects we were just talking about all integrate together, and we have full access to all the knowledge and information and wisdoms that are part of each of these components. And the mass that we have, this so-called invisible veil between the physical realms and the spiritual realms, drops, and we leave this dualistic separation, and we become a harmonistic whole with all of heaven, and we also become able to work with the divine plan in basically reunifying all the physicality with the spiritual realms.
Okay. So the Galactic Federation will be arriving here.
They're actually here already. The giant problem with our planet, of course, is that technically most of the major governments on this world have thrown up this incredible fable, as I like to call it, that we live in a world where we're the only living things as far as we know in the reality called physicality, and that anything talked about as spaceships, etc., from other worlds is open to question. And of course this has led to that thing I like to talk about all the time, which is, of course, the UFO cover-up.
Yes.
To me, they're not UFOs, they're IFOs. They're identified flying objects, and the science and the capabilities that they have is, of course, something that physics knows, and of course it's beyond the realms of, you might say, the Newton, Einsteinian, etc. concept of science. It's basically gone beyond all of that. And I believe very deeply that the future of physics and of science is its combination of combining with consciousness, and that most of the basic information that we now have gleaned from just studying the physical realms will be vastly modified, if not changed, in drastic ways, so that we will create what I like to call a spiritual science, or a science of consciousness.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that.
I am too.
Yes, and I notice a lot of, well, I guess we've all noticed a lot of movies and television are continuing to portray extraterrestrials in a negative light, but I do see some positive information coming through, being revealed, like on the History Channel.
Right, they have done some things, like Sci-Fi Channel a few years ago attempted to do a really positive and open investigation of the famous Roswell incident, July 1947, and of course they got stonewalled and stopped. It's unfortunate that happened, but that's part of this cover-up. And of course, for every positive thing you have something like a major film coming out like War of the Worlds, which was to me a monster retread of the worst kind. But anyway,
but I found it interesting that a lot of people I know didn't want to see it.
Right.
They just didn't want to. And part of it was because of all the hype of the movie. They really pushed that. And so they were picking up on something. So I don't think they accomplished what they wanted to.
No, I don't think that they really did. All they did was provide a movie that was wonderful if you love the special effects genre. if you're into the better computer graphics that are possible instead of the worst ones. It was loaded with really incredible, all kinds of amazing graphic effects, which are state-of-the-art in Hollywood these days. But the process of the movie, as far as I'm concerned, its intent had already been said a few times by originally H.G. Wells and then by George Palina and Associates in the early 1950s original version, which they were basing this on. And that, to me, was really the better movie, because it, unlike this one, which was very negative in the way it portrayed everything, in that one you had more of an ending that was very positive. George Pell had this thing where people were praying and everything happened, and they brought the whole concept of what was going on into a more positive light. And I really liked the ending of that one compared to the ending of this thing that they did last summer. But anyway, I don't want to turn into a movie critic here, but that's basically my feeling. You know, the 50s started this whole process with, you know, Earth versus the flying saucers, and you can go on and on and on and on. I've seen practically all of those movies. I used to drag my mother to all of them. I had this curiosity. I wanted to see every UFO sci-fi movie ever made.
So you were disappointed?
I've always been disappointed with the way they portrayed everything. It always wound up that Hollywood has this giant need, which I think is part of this cover-up, to make everything look bad. And so anytime they would do anything that looked positive, you would always have this massive dose of negativism. So, of course, I guess they were trying to tell stories. The closest I saw to a positive UFO movie probably is Forbidden Planet, which is the famous Walter Pidgeon movie. But that was a retaking on the science fiction mode of the Shakespeare Taming of the Shrew. But it was very nice.
Okay, but we'll get to see the real thing shortly.
Right. Well, yeah, it's going to be more like E.T. without the bad guys in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Some people look at the movie E.T. as kind of a science fiction version of the resurrection, but anyway, because he dies and then he comes back miraculously.
Now, with First Contact, the Galactic Federation is already here. How has the scenario changed over the years?
Well, this is one of the things that to me has really been the most interesting aspect of Contact, is that initially First Contact started out as a process to observe what was happening and just act as a general aider or helper. And this is when the medical teams that the First Contact team has as part of its aspects. What we are going through right now is a massive transformation of our bodies with the other components we were just talking about to achieve full consciousness. And then what the medical teams were doing, and are still doing, of course, is to act as more physical elements to help us through this whole process. That's why a lot of times people will wake up and they'll see funny little blotches on their body where the Federation was medical people were either taking blood samples or had instruments or whatever. And so this is part of the adjustment. So basically the first part of this process of contact was this general overlooking, and then the second part of it was looking at planet Earth and thoroughly observing it in a new way as we were looking at it for the whole transformation aspect. And so this all continued on this way to the late 1990s when First Contact began to shift. It then began looking upon itself as basically acting as a mediator or as a instigator for moving this planet forwards into new political and, you might say, transformations not only on an economic level but on a social level. And so we've had a tremendous increase not only in consciousness but of movements which have expressed the change in consciousness. And the Federation has been working on all different levels to help that movement come forward, basically manifest and become more and more part of the general quote-unquote mainstream of the social, economic, and political platform that our whole society is based on.
Mm-hmm.
Now,